Welcome to Director 101. This is an interesting one. I am talking about a topic that may be a little bit uncomfortable, mainly because it was uncomfortable for me just about a week ago, where I probably spent a couple hours with another individual, and we were talking about this topic. We are talking about the topic of being spread too thin. The moment I say that, you're spread too thin. In your mind, you're probably either, you might just totally agree, like, oh, right, I'm spread way too thin. There's probably enough things that have happened that you're like, okay, this isn't working, or you might even be a little defensive. I personally, little defensive, because it implies that I'm not doing my job, that I'm not doing it well. But really, spread too thin is something that you have to think about. You have to work through whether or not this is taking place in your life. So here's kind of the way it works for us. We say, okay, here's what's going on in my life. I have all these various roles, all these various things that are going on. So obviously I have work, and I have church, and I have home, and I have my ministry, and I have community. Make as many roles as you have there. And in our life, what we have is this way to say, okay, I'm going to cover all this. This is good. I'm doing well. Look at, I'm able to cover all this. Woohoo! I have covered all the responsibilities that I have. I am set to go. What do we do for a guy who's doing good? He's doing a good job in all of his areas. What do we do to that guy who has all the roles in his life? He's covering it. Yep, his circle gets bigger. His time, his ability, his talent, none of that. Now, he might get some more talent because he's getting more experience. He might figure out a few things, but everything seems to get a little bit bigger in his life. He's given more responsibility in ministry. He's got some more things that are pulling on him in community. Home life, even. Things are getting, and this is just the natural way that it goes in home. You get married. That was the simplest time there in life. Then you add kids. Then your kids add kids. And it keeps on going. So somebody who's doing well in church, that just keeps getting added. Then what happens is I've got this same amount of talent and ability, and I'm saying, okay, I'm going to try to cover this. And there's no way for this to cover. What do? What happens at this point? Either I try to kind of spread myself all over, and now I am missing things in every role in my life, or I say to myself, there are a few things in my life that are really important. I'm going to make sure that I take and cover everything that is home. Okay, now I've got two left, and I guess I'll do a little bit of here at work and maybe a little bit here at ministry. Man, this role, totally just almost like I can't do much at all because I'm spread too thin, and I can't actually be in more than one place at one time. I want you to just answer the question honestly. Are you spread too thin? No, really, answer the question. Are you spread too thin? I was faced with this, and immediately I want to say no, and then I have to sit there and ask myself, am I spread too thin? Here's the first thing that I want you to understand in this whole discussion about being spread too thin. Others know better. Being spread too thin is not just an efficiency question. It's not just, was I there? Can I mark that off my list? It's an effectiveness question. So you might be able to relate to this. You're spending time with your wife, you're spending time with your kids, and you realize that you are physically there. You're able to mark it off your list, but effectively, you're not there. Effectively, you're somewhere else in that discussion. I think that others know better as to whether or not you are spread too thin. In fact, I don't think the question I just asked you is fair for you to answer. I think you need to ask that question of the people who are closest to you and ask yourself, am I spread too thin? Now, you're going to obviously get some people that want more of your time than they are already getting. But you're asking yourself, how am I being ineffective? What is going on that I am not doing? So the real question of being spread too thin is taking an ineffective test. Am I being ineffective in the things that I am doing? It's possible to stay busy, but not really being do a good job. This is when you can answer that question, are you spread too thin? Because you know that, oh man, the thing that I just accomplished, it wasn't really that good. It wasn't really that effective. And sometimes we can kind of fake it. Trying to figure out if you're spread too thin, you want to say, okay, am I being ineffective in the things that I am doing? And then I think that you have to take personal responsibility for the times where you realize I am being ineffective. I have to sit there and say, okay, this is my problem, mine. Nobody else's. I have to figure this one out. So the personal responsibility to say, okay, I am spread too thin means that I'm now trying to work through a number of things to say, okay, what do I do? How do I get back into line? One thing that you might have to do is say no. Another thing that you might have to do is lower expectations. If you're going to lower expectations, that means maybe something that you were trying to do to this level, you're just going to have to say, okay, it's not going to be that good. Maybe it's based on what's happened in the past, but you're just going to say, okay, I can't. This one, I've got to say no to that. And then, thirdly, there has to be the willingness to adapt. Those of you who are good planners, you put a plan together for the next month. You put all that plan together without any knowledge of the unknowns that God has in store for you. So you've got your plan, and then you stick to that plan. Meanwhile, God puts a few things into your life that you didn't know were going to happen. And when that happens, you try to keep your plan, plus do the things that God put into your life, and you're going to have to adapt. You're going to have to say no to something. You're going to have to rework this plan. You'll have to be okay with it. You can sit there and be like, okay, well, I'm just spread too thin. That's just the way it's going to be. It's the nature of the job. I don't think so. I think this is a matter of trusting God, trusting others, being willing to just be okay with what God's plan is. I know when I was sat back and it hit me that, okay, I think you're spread too thin. And it's hit me a number of times over the years. Then I've got to sit there and make sure that I'm saying no to the right thing. So sometimes the thing that brings it up that, whoa, you're being ineffective, we want to adjust that item, when in reality we might have to go somewhere else to a different, maybe something less important, something easier to say no to, and figure out what I'm going to do with that one. Are you spread too thin? It's one of those things that every leader has to do the self-evaluation and then has to be willing to open himself up to some criticism maybe from others to figure out if you are spread too thin. You do not want to be an ineffective director. Best way to do that, spread too thin. See if you can make the adjustments to not be spread too thin.